And so if I wanted to test and see, is x minus 6 a factor of this whole polynomial here? Rather than going through and trying to use long division or synthetic division to factor and test to see does it go in with no remainder, what I can do is I can test this. Okay, now, if x minus 6 is a factor of this polynomial, what would my remainder be? 0. So that's the test that you can run. So if I took my calculator here and I took my function 3x cubed minus 27x squared plus 324, and I use my width key, so vertical bar x equals, and I test to see the corresponding 0 to this factor is 6. And I hit enter. I see it's 0. That means that the remainder when I divide this factor by, or this expression by this factor, is 0. So what that means is my answer is yes. And now here's what you're going to wind up having to do next year. In pre-calc, what you're going to do is you're going to go through, you're going to figure out, and we'll talk later in this section about it, what are some of the possible zeros? And then you're going to test to see which of those zeros actually works. And so if you use this to test and see if the 0 works, it might save you some time then rather than having to do long division or synthetic division of every single possible factor. Right? And so what you would then do in a problem like this, if you get that the remainder is equal to 0, you could then go through and do the synthetic division. Okay? So you would get 3, negative 27. There's no x's, so 0, 324, your corresponding factor, or the 0 that corresponds to the factor is 6. And so if you drop this down, you get 3, 18, subtract here, you get negative 9, multiply, add down, multiply. And so you get this remainder of 0. What that then means is the remaining factor after that is x squared minus 9x minus 54. And then what you can do, once you get to quadratic factors, you can now factor them more easily, right? You might be able to take out a 3 from each of these terms, leaving x squared minus 3x minus 18. And then from here, you might be able to factor this completely. The factors of negative 18, whose sum is negative 3, is x minus 6, x plus 3. So you had this factor out front of x minus 6. And so when you're looking at this, your total factors are 3 times x minus 6 squared times x plus 3. And so next year, what you would do is you would be able to factor polynomials with higher degree than just an x squared by using this whole process. Test it to see, is there a remainder? Once you find the one that's a 0, you can then use synthetic division and then reduce the rest out as far as you possibly can. Now, with that said, I'm not going to have you do this whole process, but you can expect that that would be something that you likely have to do in pre-calc. Okay, so if I wanted you to test this second polynomial and see is x minus 6 a factor of this, I want you to go ahead and do that now if you haven't already. And you can do that using the remainder theorem. And if your remainder is 0 when you test it, then it is a factor. If it's not, then it's not a factor. So if you take your expression, 4x cubed minus 4x squared plus 6x minus 3, use the width key, x is equal to 6 is the corresponding 0 once again for that factor. And when I test this, I get 753. So here f of 6 does not equal 0. So it is not a factor.